Prepare to experience the strongest radio allowable by law. Secrets will be revealed. Myths dispelled. From the studio gym where excuses never apply, it's Superhuman Radio with your host, Carl Lenore.
Before we get started, I have to thank my title sponsor, and that's Legendary Foods, makers of the Tasty Pastry. The Tasty Pastry started out as a solution to the Pop-Tart, but it's become so much more because you'll think you're really eating cake when you eat the Tasty Pastry. The flavors are amazing, 20 grams of high-quality protein, less than 1 gram of sugar, and for those of us who observe our carbohydrate intake, 4 to 5 net carbs, so it'll keep you in your lane if you're a low carb or keto person. Go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary. Use the code SHR10 today and save 10% off, and let them know that you heard about them here on Superhuman Radio. This is the Pep Talk with Dr. Carl Paige. We're going to talk about a very interesting peptide.
GHK-Cu is the name of it. It's really a tripeptide, very small, naturally occurring, found in multiple tissue locations in the body. Really discovered roughly early 70s. It has a lot of regenerative skin, particularly impact. Works locally by, really my concept of it is more like a copper buffer, delivering the important copper ion to places that's needed for a lot of physiologic response reactions to inflammation or recovery or neuroregeneration. But it also has some pleiotropic effects as well, and it has more recent data on, actually gene expression modulation more than just that local buffer for copper deposition.
Now, this peptide seems to have an affinity to copper. Why does it seem to attract and attach to copper?
Just the chemical structure of it with the copper ion, it's almost like it was literally designed to do that. So it's naturally occurring. It was not a synthetic peptide. Copper is very important on multiple metabolic processes in the body.
So what does that mean to people who don't have enough copper? There's a lot of people who have copper deficiencies. In fact, I did a show that linked certain types of cardiomyopathy to suboptimal levels of copper. It actually causes the muscle of the heart to become weakened and striated. So we know there are people out there who don't have enough copper in their bodies. What happens if they don't have enough copper?
It's one of those elements that needs to be in the right range. You can get too much copper and it can cause problems, or you can not have enough copper and cause problems. And I think that's really where GHK-Cu comes into play on the local level with its effect, is that it's that buffer that can provide that copper when it's needed, or actually take up the copper if there's too much copper for things to work at an optimal level. So that copper buffer to really there to keep this local environment in balance related to copper metabolism so that you don't get inadequate levels or excess levels.
There's an interesting phenomenon. More people in the United States have way too much iron than don't have enough iron. And
right.
Iron displaces copper. The more iron your body absorbs, the more copper it displaces and you excrete. Know that the literature shows that this naturally occurring tripeptide seems to, like so many things, diminish with age. And it could be that our propensity to accumulate iron could be helping drive this diminishing levels of this copper peptide. What do you think about that?
I think that's a great hypothesis. These elements do interact with each other, and the body has a very complex mechanism to try to keep that in balance. If you've got too much of an overload of iron, which it does create copper metabolism abnormalities indirectly. In the majority of the patients that I'll see will have too much iron as opposed to not enough iron.
This peptide seems to play a profound role on protecting liver cells. But isn't there a study out there that shows that it's either protective or regenerative? And maybe part of the way the liver regenerates is because of this peptide?
There's definitely data available to support that. The copper peptide and copper metabolism is regenerative as far as causing a new blood vessel ingrowth and recovery on a cellular level for multiple tissues in the body. It's not just a skin peptide alone, which is where most of the medical data you're going to see on it and where a lot of the published data is.
cosmetic industry is $100 billion industry, and they seem to love this peptide, again, because it's right around 400 point something Dalton. So it's exactly at the threshold where it can get through the stratum corneum, but also because it seems to stimulate resynthesis of collagen and structural fibroblasts in skin that are desirous to keep your skin from getting wrinkles and sagging, right?
It can tighten new skin, reverse thinning of aged skin, repairs that skin outside wall barrier. The skin's firmer, has more elasticity, can be clear, loss of some of the like brown spots with aging, fine lines and wrinkles.
Really?
And list of positive things that are associated with application of it that are documented are pretty long list of all good things.
Let's talk a little bit about DNA. This peptide seems to have some sort of protective mechanism with DNA. Is that correct? There's some literature out there?
There is some literature out there on that. DNA is vulnerable to, ionizing radiation.
It seems that these smaller peptides, these 2, 3, 4, 5, even up to 8 amino acid peptides, they seem to have pleiotropic effects that the larger peptides, even going up to growth hormone at 191 amino acids, they seem to have more specific, narrowly focused effects. Are you noticing that?
Absolutely. And when you look at this very small peptides, you'll see the little, 3, 4 sequences in the larger peptides. They'll be there and having, playing part of that sort of.
Interesting.
Yeah, they'll be in the larger peptides.
I like to refer to the amino acid sequences that we see as syntax, because we know that peptides are messages. And
right.
Like messages, they have words and spaces that tell the story. And words, to me, are like your example here, that you can look at some of these other peptides and you can see this peptide maybe 2 or 3 times at different points, the same way you would see the word the or and stringing together a concept or an idea. So I like to refer to that as syntax. So you're saying that this peptide shows up as syntax in a lot of other more complex peptides.
Yes. And that's not true just for this one, but several other smaller peptides. But it is like a language, and that language, when you add a lot of words, has a much more specific meaning. And when you have small pieces, it can have a much broader, be used in a lot of different contexts, essentially, is what you're saying with the word syntax.
What about its ability to reverse the effects of aging? What kind of tissues do we see that in, besides skin, obviously?
The effect on nerve regeneration is particularly interesting because we have, neuropathy, like we've talked about in a couple of talks. I'm particularly interested in that one myself, but, those are going to be more likely on a subcutaneous application, unless you've got some really superficial peripheral neuropathies, but especially on axonal neuropathy where you have loss of the neuron, I'm interested in that and trying to see
yes.
Demyelination and remyelinating a neuron, you've got a better situation there, but actually getting a neuron to regenerate so far we've not been very good at that.
So does this peptide effectively cross the blood-brain barrier?
I can't quote you a study that says they've applied it topically or given sub-Q and seen it cross into the central nervous system. Nerve and blood vessel regrowth has clearly been documented with it. I don't know if that is from central nervous tissue, though. I don't have that data in front of me right now.
This is interesting because since it naturally occurs in humans and mammals, you would think that it probably does cross the blood-brain barrier.
Yeah, it should. From a size standpoint, I just didn't want to quote it without having the data to back it up.
So if you were going to use this in your practice with someone who came in and had peripheral sensory neuropathy or even muscular activation innervation neuropathies, you would give this to them systemically. Like you said, sub-Q. What kind of dosing would you look at?
Maybe a couple of milligrams a day, 1 to 2 milligrams a day, something like that.
Right. Interesting.
That's probably what I would shoot for.
Would you do this over the course of like twice a day, or one shot in the morning, one shot in the evening? Because
it would depend on the volume of what it would concentrate down to. Just because when you get above half a ml sub-Q, it's a little bit more sometimes. So it just depends on concentration of it as to how you would split it up. And at least off the top of my head, it is systemic, but I would probably want to apply sub-Q near where we had the neuropathy.
Yeah, get it? Because I learned this years ago. So when you inject a peptide, it starts to seek out receptors immediately. So naturally, it's going to saturate the receptors closest to the injection site first. And then once they're satisfied, it moves up the road. And it's this kind of almost like, a rhythmic transition outward. So you may as well, even like with things like BPC 157, if you're dealing with tennis elbow, then inject it as close to the site as you can get reasonably. Because it'll start to work faster, if nothing else.
Right. I mean, if you're going for more of a systemic effect or upregulating growth hormone receptors or things, you might as well do it in the abdomen. But if you've got a targeted tendinitis or tendonitis, I usually do apply BP 157 locally. I would look at the GHK-Cu if we're trying to achieve neuroregeneration in the same way from a peripheral neuropathic standpoint.
Yeah. I want to take our first commercial break. And when we come back, I want to talk briefly about something that's kind of exciting about this peptide, and is that there was an early French study that showed that it actually regrew hair. And when you talk about regrowing hair, there's a lot of guys, not you, I know you're happy that you don't have to worry about it. Yeah, I know. But there's a lot of guys out there, including myself, who would like to keep as much of our hair as possible as we go through life. And this peptide may have some real magic to it. So let's stay tuned. We'll be right back with more. We're talking with Dr. Carl Paige. We'll be right back with more of the Pep Talks. More than 240 million Americans take supplements daily in pill form, but poor nutrient absorption means the promised results are rarely achieved. Healthy Cell uses a clinically proven patent-pending gel delivery system that increases absorption by 165% over pill form. Go to shrnetwork.biz/healthycell. That's HEALTHYCELL today and use the code SHR to save 20% off your purchase of Healthy Cell supplements.
New Mass Pro Synthogen X2 just upped its own legendary game. To distance itself even further from the rest of the pack, Synthogen X2 now has double the key active ingredients. If you've ever wondered what steroid-like recovery feels like, Synthogen X2 delivers. See why others compare it favorably to powerful bodybuilding drugs at synthogen.com. Mass Pro Synthogen. When you train with it, you'll gain with it.
I would easily say that I am the hugest proponent you will ever meet to doing anything that will improve the quality of my sleep. And that's because sleep is linked to just about every metabolic disorder we see in our population today. One of the easiest things you can do to improve the quality of your sleep is to get a pillow that can be shaped into the exact form factor that allows you to get your best night's sleep. And that is MyPillow. I've been sleeping with MyPillow for a few years now, and I can tell you that when I have to travel and stay in hotels, I don't get a good night's sleep because I don't have MyPillow with me. Right now, you can save up to 60% off of everything offered to improve the quality of your sleep at shrnetwork.biz/mypillow when you use the code SHR. Or you can call toll-free 800-889-4938. And remember to use code SHR to save up to 60% off of everything at their website. Being superhuman means being conscientious about the choices we make. White Oak Pastures is superhuman when it comes to raising livestock. They're committed to animal welfare, land regeneration, and rural revival. They responsibly manage the entire process from the pasture to your doorstep. High quality, pasture raised, great tasting meat from a farm you can trust. Full nose to tail selections. They even have options for your pet. Go to shrnetwork.biz/whiteoak and use the code superhuman to save 10% off your entire first order. If you'd like a shortcut to better sleep, more energy, and calmer, more stable moods, then you should make sure you're supplementing with magnesium daily. Let me tell you why. About 75% of people are magnesium deficient. This deficiency can lead to higher levels of anxiety, irritability, trouble sleeping, and low energy. It can even contribute to foot and leg cramps while you sleep. Magnesium Breakthrough by Bioptimizers is the single best magnesium supplement in the world. Simply take 2 capsules before you go to bed, and you'll be amazed by the improvements in your mood and energy levels, and how much more rested you feel when you wake up. I take Magnesium Breakthrough every night, and I sleep better because I use it. Go to magbreakthrough.com/SHR and use the code SHR10 during checkout to save 10% off and get free shipping. Check it out. Plant medicine has become all the rage for mental optimization. Now there's an ancient plant medicine rapidly growing in popularity that experts believe might just be the alcohol of the future. It's called True Kava. Kava is a natural food-grade elixir that has been used for over 3,000 years by South Pacific Islanders as safe, non-addictive alternative to drugs and alcohol. By naturally boosting the brain's main field feel-good chemicals, dopamine, serotonin, and GABA, Kava provides you with both increased relaxation and mental clarity at the same time. True Kava is a new form of stabilized full-spectrum traditional Kava that is third-party lab tested for quality and safety. Go to shrnetwork.biz/True Kava, and that's TRUKAVA, all one word, and use code SHR for 25% off today.
This is the Superhuman Channel, where we use oxygen for the power of good.
Welcome back to the Pep Talk with Dr. Carl Paige. Seems to be a quality to this peptide that may regrow hair, huh?
Yes, there's a lot of already published data that was supportive of that, a lot of anecdotal data.
The French study not only showed regrowth, but it showed that gray hair went back to the original color. And
Yeah.
we know that copper plays a role in pigmentation of the follicle.
Correct. I mean, just like it does in the natural world with leaves and things like that to generate colors, and it's an anti-inflammatory locally. It has some ability to block DHT, alpha reductase conversion, and those are already great things. But when it look at its angiogenic properties, its ability to help with stem cell production and migration, all of the things you would need to cause recovery of local tissue and regeneration are really augmented by the copper peptide.
So now that you mentioned about anti-inflammatory effects, there looks like there is actually some new research going on where they're looking at this copper peptide in place of corticosteroids. Now, we know that corticosteroids, while they reduce inflammation, they do it at a pretty hefty price. They do it at degeneration of soft tissue, weakening of soft tissue, degeneration of muscle tissue, catabolic effects on muscle tissue. They also can screw up electrolyte dramatically and partitioning of calcium and sodium and potassium that can lead to at least facial swelling and water retention, at worst, changes in heart rhythm. So corticosteroids, while they're what we got and we need them sometimes, and let's not forget, most of them are delivered orally and they're methylated, which means that there's a lot of damage or potential damage to, as they like to call it, hepatic stress. So you have to take them for a short period of time. And all of a sudden, here we are, once again with the peptide that doesn't do any of those horrible things, but may actually do all the things that corticosteroids are known to do, right?
And you left out diabetes and weight gain and all of the others, just sort of global systemic things that happen with steroids. So yes, they've sort of been magical in a certain way, steroids, but they come it's like using a sledgehammer to, kill a fly. They just really obliterate so many other things and disrupt so much metabolism. So the copper peptides have quite a unique ability, like a lot of peptides, to sort of come in locally, assess the situation, and act where they need to, and leave most other things untouched. And they can be used in combined maybe with BP157 to help recovery from steroid local impacts and muscle damage and things like that. To allow that, when you get a big walloping, I'm sure a lot of physicians have seen this, where you give that shot of steroids in someone's muscle and they come in 2 weeks later, and now they've got a giant divot or a loss of muscle tissue. There's
horrible.
It does give you a short-term effect, but it has huge consequences downstream. So, these type of peptides with the copper, BPC157, can help recover from that type of damage that's generated from a traditional medical management of a syndrome.
So, is its anti-inflammatory effects that pronounced? Because corticosteroids, they work very quickly. A person could walk into their doctor's office and have a terrible case of chronic overuse in their elbow. The doctor gives them a cortisone shot, and by the time they're walking out, they're like, well, and I have to step back. Most doctors include some sort of anesthetic, numbing agent when they inject it. They say it's so that they know that they're hitting the right spot, but that's really why people feel better immediately. But it's true that these corticosteroids are pretty fast acting at suppressing inflammation and pain. Do the copper peptides work that fast also?
Steroids maybe within hours, it's, 6 to 8, 12 hours, depends on the steroid used and half-life of it and the potency of it and the volume you would use as to how soon you would get an impact from it. But you're right, the most immediate thing with the steroids is going to be the thing to make it kind of numb it up. And
Right.
Then your copper peptides, I don't know if I've got information or data to give you that say that they're going to immediately replace that in clinical use, but they've got a lot of potential, and certainly there's a lot of work that needs to be done in that area, because the downsides of long-term use of either local or systemic steroids are going to outweigh their benefits in a lot of cases. And the physicians administering those in the vast majority of cases are, getting informed consent on that. I mean, you sign some papers before they stick these needles in you. It's going to make you feel better, but there's going to be some downsides to it or potential negatives. So, they're aware of that. And it does dictate the amount and the volume of use in local steroid injections and how much you can use in a particular tendon. If you just took, who was it the other night that they thought blew his Achilles, Kevin Durant.
I hear about this story. This story I've heard over the years every time. I've heard about someone getting a steroid injection in an elbow, in a wrist, in a muscle in the leg, and literally like 2 weeks later, blowing a tendon.
Just very common, yeah.
And one of the things I discovered, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I may be wrong, but chronic use of, which there are a lot of people who have chronic pain and they say, can only get 3 cortisone shots a year or 4 cortisone shots a year. But by the end of the year, the affected soft tissue, the tendon itself, starts to develop what is known as tendinosis, where the tissue starts to unravel and become striated and more rigid, where it's actually prone to breaking.
Right. It'll create a section of the tendon that's like a weak link in the chain, essentially. And the whole tendon itself is at the same, it's going to stress fail wherever that weak link is, essentially. And, that's known to happen with large tendons like Achilles and things like that. They're not going to drop a big load of steroids into that because it just takes too much load, and it's going to fail, if that happens. So,
right. Yeah, so this is another area of exploration for this copper peptide.
Yeah.
So this copper peptide, would it be wise to use this copper peptide as a prophylactic as you're aging, to put into your, because I use a lot of peptides prophylactically. I use BPC 157 post-workout all the time because I want to recover faster. I have now switched away from growth hormone, and I'm using 100 micrograms of GHRP6 and 100 micrograms of real CJC 1295. It always frustrates me that I have to quantify or qualify. CJC 1295 has the drug affinity complex. If it's not, then it's just called growth hormone releasing hormone. But I use 100 micrograms of each a couple times a day. And so I'm using these things prophylactically. If they're not therapeutic because I don't have a problem yet, could I use this copper peptide prophylactically, you think?
From a recovery standpoint, from skin standpoint, yes. I mean, a lot of people will use it for, fine lines, wrinkles, age spots. You use it for a while, as the skin recovers, then you can back off. You do have to watch local overload. I wouldn't use it every day for months on end, but you can watch local effect, and when things start to regenerate, then you can decrease frequency and even use intermittent use on it. But from a skin standpoint, absolutely. From a body recovery standpoint, it has data on it for use as an experience with it for use as a general recovery peptide. And but the main things are going to be initially skin elasticity, and skin recovery is where we've got most of the data now. Now hair recovery.
The hair one, look, regrowing hair or protecting hair from being lost in the first place is a multi-billion-dollar business. It goes from hair weaves and hair transplants to federal FDA-approved shampoos and drugs. This is big business. Like next to erectile dysfunction, I would say that more men are worried about their hair than their erections. And
well, I would say it's probably bigger than that, because if you don't have the confidence to really get out of the house and initiate contact, you don't need an erection.
You don't need an erection. Exactly. Yeah, that's a really good point. If this works, this is going to be like, forget about it. It's going to be huge because instead of using drugs that block DHT, which have other side effects, or instead of using things that, after you put it on, you can't go near your children for an hour, this will be injected, microneedled into the scalp.
Well, then, we're looking back at just how the peptides work. I mean, they work locally. They're signaling triggering molecules. They I looked at them like buffers of life. They normalize the way life's supposed to work in their local application when they're having their impact. So it's really remarkable how these little small peptide sequences are like the words of the language of life, essentially, and that makes sense when you understand what they are and how they work, and kind of explains their ability to have very potent effects with really negligible, for the most part, potential or even measured side effects.
I've looked into this because I said this one day unabashedly, and then thought, I better go back and look. But the reality is that I don't think there is any peptide we're using today, and this includes growth hormone, other than insulin, that there is a known lethal dose. I mean, some of the biggest doses, HCG, they give women 10,000 units in one intramuscular shot to stimulate the correction of hormones that make them fertile. I mean, okay, I've taken too much melanotan one time, and it wasn't pretty because every dark spot on my body literally turned black. It was like, oh my God, I just gave myself black cell carcinoma. No, it was, but that's what it looked like. Yeah. But I mean, those things, they make you nauseous and stuff like that, but they don't kill you. These peptides, by and large, are fairly, easy to deal with if you take logical doses.
Sure. And if you follow, the available guidelines on dosing, you're going to experience side effects, local site injection side effects, maybe some flushing with CJC. A lot of people will get, every multiple injections, they'll get a flush episode. But it does make you feel a little strange when you do it, but it goes away quickly and it doesn't have any residual. There are ones, particularly with the growth hormone secretagogues, the super potent ones that last forever. Then, long-term overuse, those comes along with all the known side effects of excess growth hormone use.
Sure.
But that's why things like CJC and IPA, being low potency and not saturating the receptor are much better alternatives than we used to have. So the availability of these modified peptides, tweaking them down to the dose that works but doesn't have side effects of any measurable amount, if used appropriately, is just wonderful.
So if I wanted to, I'm thinking of this. If I wanted to add this copper peptide to my morning regimen of peptides as a prophylactic, because I'm thinking, I'll just inject it. It'll work on my skin. It'll work on my liver. It'll work on other tissue. It'll work on inflammation. I'll just inject it. If I wanted to take that as a prophylactic, I had no real signs of anything that I was trying to reverse. 1 milligram a day, you think?
Yeah, but I would probably pulse it just because of the potential for theoretically copper excess over time, because you don't know what your environmental exposure is going to be. How well do you clear copper? Do you have problems with ceruloplasmin that you aren't aware of? Copper metabolism or copper clearance defects. So I don't know that I would just start randomly on a patient with a daily dose ongoing. I would likely pulse it if we were going to use it in that manner. And you would also want to monitor, what copper in the system, red cell copper or, serum coppers, just to see if the patient had an overload. And also at the same time, look at zinc metabolism, because there is an interplay there as well as with iron.
And when you say pulse it, what would you use it every third day? Something like that pulse? Or
well, that would be less likely to get you into a problem, or maybe it's like, 3 or 4 weeks on, a couple of months off, one of those type of things. That might be that's a safe way that you could use it, but it's certainly ongoing use continuously. I don't know that I would recommend that.
Okay. I want to take one last commercial break. And when we come back, I want to touch on the DNA protective effects, because there is some literature out there, and you may not have seen it. So if we can't talk about it, we can't. but there is some literature out there that shows that this may protect against certain types of cancers. We're talking with Dr. Carl Paige. This is the Pep Talk. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Most people have heard of phytoestrogens, but did you know there are beneficial phytoandrogens? The top source of these is pine pollen. It even contains trace amounts of testosterone and DHEA. If you're looking for a 100% natural testosterone booster, this is worth trying. Lots of men love it, and it even works for women. Lost Empire Herbs offers the highest quality, wild-harvested, non-irradiated pine pollen backed by a 365-day money-back guarantee. It works for you, or you don't have to pay for it with nothing to send back. Go to shrnetwork.biz/Lost Empire. Use code SHR. Get 15% off your order today. If you've listened to this show for any length of time, you know that I have struggled to give up coffee for years. Coffee has destroyed my gut and it's impaired my health. Well, I haven't had coffee in months thanks to a product called Magic Mind. Magic Mind is the first nootropic blend I actually feel working. One shot and I'm good all day long. My memory is crystal clear and I'm able to function and have great focus without coffee or caffeine for that matter. If you want to try a product that really works, if you're like me and you want to give up coffee forever, or you just need something occasionally that will help you lift the brain fog, Magic Mind is your product. I promise you that this product you will feel when you use it. Go to shrnetwork.biz/Magic Mind, all one word, and use the code SHR for a whopping 20% off your first order. C60, also known as Buckminster fullerene, is the most powerful, most versatile antioxidant in the world. It's been shown in studies to double the lifespan of rodents. We all know the importance of taking antioxidants to slow aging, reduce inflammation, and improve mitochondrial function and energy production. But there are literally hundreds of antioxidants that would cost you thousands of dollars to take every day. I take one. I take C60 from C360 Health. Revive and Rejuvenate are two blends that harness the power of C60. Don't waste another minute. Go to shrnetwork.biz/revive and use the code SHR for 15% off and free shipping inside the United States today.
Dogs should be powered by fat and protein, not carbs. That's why Visionary Pet makes low-carb, ketogenic dog food for dogs of all breeds and life stages. From kibble to freeze-dried and even low-carb treats, all Visionary Pet recipes are very low-carb, ketogenic, and made with 100% real meat protein. Shop now and use code SHR for 20% off your first order today. Your dog deserves the lifelong benefits of optimal nutrition. Make the switch to Visionary and see why smart dogs eat low carb.
Are you 35 or older? Every year after puberty, your growth hormone decreases sometimes by 50% by the age of 35, and it only keeps going down from there. This affects everything from making it harder to recover from workouts, sleep, and a general loss of a sense of well-being. It also affects your ability to get and stay lean. BioPro Plus is the first of its kind, 100% non-synthetic alternative to prescription synthetic growth hormone treatments. All the benefits without any of the needles or side effects, and 100% safe. Previously only available through doctors, you can go to shrnetwork.biz/biopro, that's BIOPRO, and use code SHR30 for $30 off today. You may be wondering why you're experiencing performance issues in the bedroom, but you're not alone. Over 30 million men experience a form of erectile dysfunction, and to many, it can feel defeating. Maybe you've tried pills, diets, exercise, but finally there's a proven solution. Meet Eddie, a discreet device designed to help men strengthen and maintain their erections. Pills can be costly and result in debilitating side effects, so I checked out Eddie by Giddy at shrnetwork.biz/Eddie and found out that over 95% of men experience positive results wearing Eddie, according to a 2021 clinical trial. This product simply works and is easy to use. Sign up for a subscription at shrnetwork.biz/Eddie and save $20 on your first device with promo code SUPER20 with free device resizes and 60-day guarantee. You'll be glad you tried it. Treat ED with Eddie at shrnetwork.biz/Eddie. Let's talk a little bit about cancer. Are you aware of some of the research on this peptide and cancer?
Yeah, there is published data on that I have reviewed some of that. It's relatively recent too. In 2010, 2014, there's been a couple of published studies that are out on particularly metastatic colon cancer and changing the gene expression signature to help with that. And worked on multiple different pleiotropic pathways to sort of realign the gene expression signature back to not being cancer related. Has things with skin cells and recovery from fibroblasts from ultraviolet radiation damage.
Wow.
Which is resetting the apoptotic mechanism if a cell might become damaged to let it return back to its natural.
And that's from the anti-inflammatory, because we know things like ginger and curcumin, they help to reestablish that apoptotic landscape by suppressing inflammation.
Right. And, allowing the body to go ahead and deal with that potentially disrupted, cancer cell. It also has been shown to inhibit neuroblastoma cells and histiocytic lymphoma cells. All the way back to 1983 and some published data with the Pauling Institute regarding GHK-Cu and combinations of vitamin C. It would work on realigning that expression of cancer cells and upregulating genes that would help the body recover from cancer or have just general anti-cancer properties in general.
That's pretty exciting. That is exciting.
Pretty neat stuff. Yeah.
So if I were to use this, let's say I'm vain, and I'm not, because otherwise I would have done something about all this brow here. But let's say I want skin quality. Would I follow that pulsed approach and just use a milligram maybe every third day and just give myself some time? And would I see changes to my skin, you think, if I used it systemically as opposed to topically in a cosmetic delivery?
In theory, you would. If you had particular areas that you wanted, kind of like the BPC and tendinosis or tendinitis, I probably would apply topically to specific areas, particularly, fine lines and wrinkles around the eyes and things like that. I would want to use a topical solution in those areas until I saw some effect and then back off. And, of course, with the hair regrowth scenario there, you're going to want to apply locally to where you want the hair to grow if you're going.
But in theory, yeah, you'd want to apply it locally. Right. So because you'd want to really establish its effects in that tissue, because we know that scalp tissue has impaired blood flow also as we age. But in theory, if you were using it long enough at, let's say, once every third day for years, you might actually start to see some hair regrowth just on its own.
If you're correcting the cellular processes, by systemic use that sort of led to hair loss in the first place, then certainly would be a part of a general recovery regimen for hair, at least in a theoretical standpoint. I don't think there's any published data on its use like that right now, though.
Right. So Aiden Ray has a good question. He says, is zinc supplementation recommended when you are pulsing? And this is a really good question, because while we're talking about this copper peptide, it's really the amino acids that create the magic, because this acts different than just regular copper.
Right. It's not. It is that sort of buffering in the cellular milieu or intracellular milieu, the copper, adding it when you need it, pulling out when you don't need it, and then the multiple pleiotropic gene expression and downregulation effects that the peptide itself has. So it carries copper around and delivers it where it's needed and pulls it out when it's not needed. But the peptide itself has its own impact outside of just the copper metabolism effect. As far as zinc supplementation, that's more looking at systemic levels of zinc versus copper. If you're overloaded on copper, you have to use zinc to get the copper levels to come down naturally. We'll balance that out. And those have so many, the balance of copper zinc has so many impacts on multiple metabolic pathways and mood and neurotransmitter metabolism. So many people are zinc deficient, when they're measured, but it's a balance of copper zinc. So you can't give zinc long term without making sure you're monitoring zinc and copper.
Interesting. Yeah. So that's a good point. So in summary, the local effects of it are much more pronounced, obviously. If you do want to change the quality of your skin, you probably want to get a cosmetic that has it in it. But if you want to just use it prophylactically to see how it can improve the quality of your complete functionality, then you would use it systemically. Peptides are just magic. People need to start paying attention to what's happening in peptide science, because these are things that fix problems and don't just cover them up and make you think that they're not still happening. This is the bleeding edge of the future of medicine right now. Patients deserve access to it. So you doctors out there, you need to get on board. You didn't go to medical school to practice giving people statin drugs and blood pressure medicines. And no, you went to medical school because you wanted to help people. And how do you help them? You fix them. You don't cover up. You don't take the battery out of the smoke detector and act like the fire is gone. You put the fire out. That's why the doctors became doctors, and peptides hold the answer to allowing you to practice medicine the way you really want to practice medicine in the beginning. Is that an overstatement, Doc? Because I know your journey.
It's rejuvenated me on a personal level, but it's also rejuvenated, with the other things I've done. But peptides are a huge part of what I do now. From a practice standpoint, it's so nice to have safe tools that actually resolve problems as opposed to just block or dampen symptoms. So there's the anti-aging regenerative effect of a lot of these peptides. There's, people with chronic autoimmune illnesses, cognitive decline, skin, hair issues. It's covers multiple areas because they literally are just, for the most part, analogs or just direct natural substances that might have been tweaked for get a little more duration of effect in the body, but they're so clean and they have profound effects at the local and systemic level.
Well, that's all we've got today. This has been another episode of the Pep Talk.